Hi there, and welcome to Enterprise Software Defenders, a show that highlights how enterprise security leaders are using innovative technologies to stop the most sophisticated cyber attacks. In each episode, Fortune 500 CISOs share how the threat landscape has changed due to the cloud, real-world examples of modern attacks, and the role AI can play in the future of cybersecurity. I'm Evan Reiser, the CEO and founder of Abnormal Security.
And I'm Steve Ward, the former CISO of the Home Depot and TIAA.
Today on the show, we'll bring you a conversation with Betsy Wille, former Chief Information Security Officer at Abbott. Abbott is a Fortune 100 global healthcare company that manufactures a wide range of healthcare products, including diagnostics, pharmaceuticals, and medical devices.
In this conversation, Betsy shares her thoughts on the unique challenges of defending enterprise businesses, AI's impact on the evolving threat landscape, and how cybersecurity teams can harness AI more effectively.
Betsy, thanks again for making the time. I know you're super busy and excited to get a chat with you today. So maybe kick us off. You want to tell us a little bit about kind of your career and how you got to where you are today, and love to hear what brought you into cybersecurity.
Well, I was fortunate to get into cybersecurity really at the beginning of my career, so over 2 decades ago. I aged myself a little bit, but after a short stint at E&Y out of college, I took a job doing SAP security at a bank, which pretty quickly after that was acquired by JP Morgan, setting up accounts, doing that kind of work. And that group became part of the information security organization when the bank started to build that as an actual function in the company. So I had this great opportunity to really grow my career in the field as the field itself was evolving and emerging, particularly at a global bank. And what that offered, and that gave me the opportunity, was to really jump around to a lot of different roles. I actually went from being part of a group deploying a global single sign-on and access provisioning platforms with very early days to running the global SOC at JP Morgan. I mean, not a transition you typically see. And I think these days you don't always see that. A little bit more kind of specialization in different areas. So I had this great opportunity to really learn the field. I probably stood out a little bit as a young woman in the field as well. I recall that the first time I managed a team, I was probably like 25 or 26. I had 10 team members. They were all men. And I would guess that they were probably on average 10 years older than me. And here's this spunky, young thing that didn't know any better. But, not always bad to stand out. I had a lot of people in my corner for that career. And so I ended up 14 years at JP Morgan. And then 5 years at TIAA in cybersecurity leadership roles and rotating through that. And that brought me to Abbott in 2019. I joined as their second ever CISO. So came in at a time that the program was growing, the organization was growing, but turned into a bit of a wild ride because a year after we were hit with a global pandemic and Abbott emerged onto the front lines of that response. We were making COVID tests within weeks of it becoming kind of a global situation, and then out with one of the first rapid tests. So very quickly, myself and my team, we had to shift from what we were doing to mature and grow the program as a whole to really make sure we were focused on the work of the COVID testing and protect those operations. And it wasn't just for the company, of course, it was for public health, as well as we had a target on us. We were part of the cohort of companies doing vaccine treatment and testing research and development. So a crazy time. And then after over 2 decades as an operator in cybersecurity, last year I left and launched the Cybersecurity Studio, really with a focus to help other cyber leaders meet the demands of today's role.
I'm just imagining back your time at JP Morgan, right? You're leading kind of security operations. Like that's got to be one of the hardest, scariest jobs in the world. The biggest bank, all built around trust and security, is the thing. That's a tough job. I imagine a lot of sleepless nights, right? Even with an incredible team. Where does your inspiration come from, right? Because it would take some motivation and discipline and willpower and inspiration to tackle that challenge. So what is it about cybersecurity that kind of motivates you or inspires you?
Well, I mean, it was particularly a big leap, as I said, coming from not coming from a network security background, not having ever done a day in security operations to come run. And I had the tier 1, tier 2 SOC. But Well, I never backed down from a challenge. I knew it would be a really unique opportunity to step into a new space. And I should say, leading up to that, I had raised my hand to work on kind of a process improvement or a quality improvement program around the SOC holistically. So it was the SOC and the engineering team and then the incident response team and how they were all operating together. So I came into it knowing where some of the challenges were. And what it turned out was we had a really good and strong team with a lot of knowledge. The challenges we had were on people and process and building trust amongst the team in the US and the team in India, the tier 2 analysts that talking to the incident response when they, escalated alerts. Like our issues were process and people. And all of a sudden I said, well, that I know, like that I'm good at, that I've proven over my career. The deep technical expertise, I've got a team that can help me with that. And I did. And I leaned in heavily to that. I had trusted sources, I trusted people that taught me. And I wasn't afraid to recognize what I needed there and where I needed, to lean on the experts. But then I could lean into what I did best.
Betsy, if you look at sort of where we started our careers, and it was very focused on data center devices, right? Endpoints that were at a cube, and specifically what was in a data center, to what you eventually got to at Abbott, where you had your SaaS solutions, you had your cloud solutions and probably migrated there, and then also medical devices, right? And things that ended up in people's bodies. How did that change your idea around, traditionally we were, okay, someone's going to attack us on an endpoint that's in a data center, to now I have to worry about this sort of 3x environment in some instances on the things that we had to protect there and some of the attacks that occurred in those environments?
One word to sum it up is sprawl. That is really what you described. There's just more of everything. The attack surface is so much greater than it was, and it just multiplies, every year, to your point. And it's now an ecosystem of technology than it is kind of a contained environment. And when you look at it and think about a traditional technology stack, that technology stack now includes things that you control and things you don't, things that go through the central IT team and things that don't. And so one of the biggest shifts that I had to make and, continue to hear other CISOs make is this idea of the connection of that ecosystem includes the extension out to SaaS providers, cloud providers. They are protecting part of the technology stack that runs the business. So it's not a third-party relationship that's kind of cold and on paper, but one that has to evolve into a real partnership and relationship and an understanding of it. And so it is rethinking your processes of, like, I go to my partners in infrastructure to determine where we're at or to work with on the projects that we need to roll out to secure our infrastructure. We now have many more partners to work with and relationships to build. So I think that has shifted. The other is also part of that ecosystem is building greater relationships with your business, because the other part of SaaS and cloud is it is so much more accessible to the business without going through central IT. We certainly saw that in the early days of cloud and SaaS. Developers ran to AWS, sales teams ran to Salesforce and threw a credit card down, and all of a sudden we're doing business that we had no idea was out there. We've reined a lot of that in, but the business can engage a SaaS provider using a third-party service to manage it. And that never comes back through central IT. So, when cyber teams are managed under that, central IT and rely on that to be the funnel for what's out there, there's a lot of blind spots. I have a story around that. I was probably not 3 months on the job. And one of my partners in legal came running into my office and said, okay, so there's a cyber event going on at a SaaS provider in, a critical business area and I said, okay, well, who owns that relationship? And, let's go get the digital team involved. No, the digital team doesn't manage it. The business does. It's a third-party provider. Okay. There's not a lot I can do. You understand that my incident response team doesn't have visibility management, and we probably really don't have a relationship there. Happy to run point, but there's nothing we can do. You understand that? Like, it was just one of those moments of, wow, there's a lot that's outside of our control.
Yeah, I remember the days of when we used to talk about who owned technology assets, and we used to talk about drift and try to control what the business could do, right? The phrase was always shadow IT, shadow IT. And there was a time where it sort of just shifted. We were like, there's really no such thing as shadow IT. It's now business has its own IT demand. And we kind of just realized that we had to let them go in order for them to be as agile as they needed to be. So just if you look at the next 5 years, where do you think things go from a budgetary standpoint, right? We're always talking about budgets. It typically dominates every conversation, every survey that gets put out on what budget is growing where and at what percentage, and what percentage of it is against the overall IT budget. So any crystal ball guesses here on where you think this goes in the next 5 years?
I don't think you're going to have a lot of headlines that the cybersecurity budget has been cut at the biggest organizations. That's not a good look. It's not, what is going to play out. But those of us that are in, have done the role and know how these cycles go, the dollar figures might not be changing much, but your labor and resources to maintain it, to align to the growing, number of projects that are out in the business and the digital teams to support those, that may not be growing because those are, payroll and dollars spent on labor usually do tighten. So that's what constrains our ability to grow exponentially. You could give me all the money in the world to buy new tech, but if I don't have anybody to, really drive that change into the organization, maintain it, it's not going to do us any good. So those two things go hand in hand. And I think in the economy that we're in and over probably still for the next couple of years, that's where the rub is going to come in. Now, on the other hand, where I hope and think that we will continue to grow in the next 5 years is evolving our thinking that the cybersecurity budget is some kind of budget that sits with one group in the organization, and that the people needed to engage in those cybersecurity programs are only in one organization, and rather start to push this out into the business and the other IT teams and see those dollars. I mean, I would have been happy to, and did many times, fund, projects, with labor and people into, teams in the business or in other IT areas that needed to execute it, instead of taking those in just within my program. So it's, also expanding that definition. I do have another story there. I won't name any names, but there was a product that we were doing a POC on in the cloud space. And we had it in the environment, I think probably for at least a year for free under extended POC, just kept, kind of playing around with it. And I actually left. It was still there when I left. And I got a call maybe 3 months later from that vendor and the salesperson said, "Hey, I don't really know what to do here. I hate to tell them we have to yank it out, but if they're not going to make a decision about buying it, any advice?" And I said, "Take it out. I know the developers love it. Take it, tell them that, the POC is done. Pull it out of the environment, and the developers will come to the table and the development team and ask for it and come to and help the cyber team make the business case." And sure enough, that is what happened. They came back 2 months later, and it was 2 groups bringing it forward, and it was funded, and it was a go. So I think there's some changes that way.
The best advice I can give operators who are listening to this is keep a shadow budget that you use for your IT partners, so that you can fund their projects for goodwill. I've done it. You've been with me when we've done it, where we've kind of secretly funded other projects, and it's a way to get some chips on your side of the table that you can call in later, and trust me, you'll need them.
I'm tempted to make a joke here about, any abnormal manager listening to this, there is no shadow budget. So Betsy, you brought up this great point, which is probably warrants a whole episode, right? About the challenge of having enough people to actually successfully deploy and manage and operate, technology, right? I think what you said is totally true, right? You can have the best technology in the world, but if no one's there, setting it up, configuring it, monitoring, optimizing it, right? That's, these things don't work by themselves, turns out, right? So I'd love to talk about AI, right? I just feel like we'd be remiss, right, in 2023 to like not talk about AI, right, on any sort of podcast, right? It's part of our jobs.
You're not allowed. You're not allowed to.
What? Okay. But before we go into like, how does that get deployed and how does that things change? I think, inside enterprise security teams, how do you think that affects like the threat landscape, right? How do you see criminals using these technologies, and what are maybe some risks that you'd advise your peers to maybe put a little bit more weight behind that you think they might be underestimating, going forward?
Well, they're criminals, so they're going to use it every way they possibly can at every, stage of the attack chain to be more targeted and more stealth. I do think we'll see fewer attacks of opportunity and many more individualized, specialized attacks. It takes a lot of work for the criminals to put together targeted attacks. It's a lot of resources, labor, focus. And so it kind of, that had been saved, if you will, a little bit for the intelligence gathering, the intellectual property, the, high financial gain, targets. And then the rest of the attacks were more around kind of where can I find a soft target, common attack to many, see where it lands. And I think AI changes that so drastically. It will be so much easier and it becomes so much easier to create very individualized, customized attacks at organizations, maybe with a very similar arc and, an approach, but customize on the front end of how you get in and make it very real to that organization, and customize once you're in, changing just enough and evolving just enough of the tactics to make it look new. So we're going to enter a world where anything, looking for patterns of known things from before just aren't going to work as well or at all, and everything's almost going to be a 0 day. Not to be alarmist and things like that, but I think that is what changes so drastically. And so it is looking at each of those stages of the attack chain and the protections and detection and capabilities that we've put in place, and said, what is it heavily reliant on? Is it signature and pattern based? Okay, we're going to need to know, where is their roadmap going, or do we need to look at something different, because that future is here pretty quickly. The other area that the attackers will certainly take advantage of is just the new attack vectors opened up by the businesses and the business areas that are rushing to harness this opportunity. So again, not unlike the early days of cloud and SaaS, where you had credit cards thrown down and the business operating. I think that's happening here too. Businesses wanting to harness the opportunity and not let this get away or let their competitors get ahead of them. And so they're trying new AI models, they're integrating them, and the security teams are playing a catch up and trying to keep pace with that, to understand, what models are they acquiring, developing, and deploying in the organization. I think we're a little bit more ahead of it than in the early cloud days and talking about it more, but it's evolving so quickly. So it's also going to be that lack of a robust understanding of the attack surface created by the business with the use of those AI models and how those might be compromised that we now have to protect.
So Betsy, just putting like maybe a positive spin, if we can, as it relates to the workforce. Do you agree with the comment, and do you have other possibilities around positive implications of this, that when you look at sort of 95% of what we hit in the ops space, for those that have eyes on glass, there's a potential for the AI to actually work for us to get rid of that 95%. And instead of looking for a needle in a needle stack, you're actually able to find some bad things a little faster. Can you think of any other things where, okay, it's going to benefit the attackers, sure, but that's also an opportunity to benefit the operations folks and the technology here? Any other ideas on where it benefits us, right, on the defender side?
Yeah, I think in the ops space, to your point, I've run SecOps a few times over, and the thing that we still spend so much time on is tuning and normalizing data across disparate feeds to try to figure out what really is true malicious activity versus noise. So I think the ability to streamline that, not only to reduce the number of alerts, but then that actually leads us to maybe really seeing a time we can have automated containment and remediation. We've played with that, but most organizations are pretty pretty still careful about saying let it rip, because I don't really know if I trust it. I think we'll get so much more high fidelity alerts that we can see that future. So that is exciting. I also, my roots are identity and access management. So I love the possibility of AI in the access management space. Role-based access, RBAC, zero trust. I mean, the elusive dream, right? I mean, I've seen so many programs and none of them really deliver at scale because we don't really know what people need to do their job, particularly in this digital world and proliferation of systems. We've never worked really well with HR to follow somebody through their career journey and the changes in their job roles, all those things. And it's never been a great experience. So I think that there is a lot of opportunity for that to become true, that we really do have the ability to enable only what's needed.
I love it when the investment thesis matches the operational demand, because I sort of have a thesis here on the investment side that the first two domains I'm going to look at for AI to be disruptive in security is actually IAM and data protection. There's the most money has gone into them with the least amount of progress.
Yes.
And those are the two areas that I really hope from a founder standpoint, if there's any founders listening, build into that space with a pure AI platform. And I think you're going to be pretty disruptive later on.
Can I offer a thought on that? Because I have a dream of kind of the user access and data protection together. And that is that we feed a model first with the company and organizational information, like everything that we can possibly feed it with around the company's financials, their organic growth products, the acquisitions, their markets, their competitors, everything about the business. Then you use that to crawl your data and who has access to it. And maybe then you actually could discover what is your crown jewels and who might want what and have and be after it from internally and externally. Because let's face it, we can talk all we want about it outside of some very maybe niche places. Understanding, a crown jewel, that it's the project in the medical device space that is the product in 5 years, and that schematic and all the research that's going into it in some like PowerPoint and PDF document, that is the crown jewel, only up until the point that it puts into a submission for approval. And then it's the world knows it and it's no longer private. Like those are the challenges, to your point, Steve, that I would love to see what this can do.
Tell us more here. Like what is, like, help us dream about what the future could be, right? Where do you see kind of AI technology having kind of big impacts in security? And like, if we fast forward 5 years, like, what's the kind of upside case? Or what's the bull case, right? How has AI changed, how security operations work for large enterprises?
Okay, well, I'm going to give one that I feel like a lot of ground gets covered, ops, data, whatever. But I'm going to give one other. I think it is actually just kind of the application, the potential of LLMs to translate cyber and technical, talk and complexity into the business, into something business understands. Because if you also talk about something we haven't gotten materially better at over the last, 10 or so years, it's talking to the business, translating it. Again, this dream I have of, the hardest thing when you come into an organization is, especially at a leadership level, is just figuring out how the company makes money, what's most important. I mean, Abbott was $40 billion, 4 business divisions, and there could be one division under that was $2 billion of its own. I mean, these are complex, companies, and we have to protect them. We have to understand the business to protect it, and then we have to evangelize everybody in the business to be part of that journey. And we're not great at that, and we haven't developed those capabilities over time. But there's a lot of potential in just the translation through the LLM. So it's an unconventional one that changes things. But I think there's a bridge there we may see that starts to get closed that no amount of training and development is probably going to do for our workforce.
When we look at right now what's overhyped in this space, what do we need to sort of calm folks down about? Is it sort of the risks of AI? Is it, in some ways, what I see is we're calling things AI that aren't. They're a bit gimmicky, right? And integrating into ChatGPT does not qualify as being an AI security company. But anything on the operator side that you think is right now being overhyped? It could be regulatory. It could be just the technological capabilities of it happening sooner than we think.
I think I'm as curious as everybody else to see where it goes. I mean, of what is overhyped. Maybe it all is. I'm not sure. But what I would say is, I think there are probably some obvious near-term realities versus ones that are further off of the possibility. And that becomes important for particularly cybersecurity leaders to really look at. Do I see the change as something that and the opportunity that's in front of us in the next year or two, because it's ripe for that evolution? That's where we focus. We're so, we get caught up in shiny objects. So it's easy for us to be like, oh, the potential is 5 years down the road. So let's focus on it now. We got enough on our plate. So I think it's, what's right in front of us that either has already started. Because I think anything that is started with traditional AI models probably has a shorter leap to the emerging newer models versus a product that never talked much about AI, or again, you kind of saw through the smoke screen that it wasn't. That's a big leap to the models that are emerging now. So that would be one way to analyze it. The other thing is, I do think it's overhyped of how many, like the elimination of jobs that's going to occur. Like any technology, new jobs emerge, and there'll be new capabilities that we need to introduce. So I don't think that's going to, have the wide scale impact. And frankly, keep in mind, it's not going to be very far off. We're going to have people entering the workforce that are AI native. We're going to be starting to talk about that, right? That don't know any world except for an LLM, or they came up in school using ChatGPT. And so thinking about, there will be jobs that, get eliminated, but then what gets created, and where are those next jobs going to come from?
If you use this phrase like an AI native workforce, I think all of us would agree 5 years from now, there's gonna be a whole new set of risks, a whole new set of tools, a whole new set of ways we even use computers, right? Let alone run security. So in the context of the cybersecurity workforce, how do you think that affects the team over time, right? Do you see jobs shifting around? Do you see kind of new training or enablement requirements, right? I don't know, there's like a new job, which is, internal AI operations, right? Efficacy, manager, what's the how's the workforce shifted, for a security operations team with the rise of these new AI technologies?
I don't know if I have a great answer. I don't know that I know exactly how that'll shift. I think, the reality of at least the AI translation, and or really an AI original thought has to be put in to get a result out. We aren't at a place where the machines are thinking on behalf of us. We're still thinking. There is still going to be the need to validate, stress test the models to make sure we trust in what they're producing. I think those will be maybe the near-term roles, that there will be SOC analysts that are on the side validating and testing the output of it, because there's not going to be a day that we all just wake up and go, oh, I'm sure this is it. We completely trust what that's telling us. And so go ahead and lock down the environment. So I think the near term, there will be some that really understand this and will be testing the model's output, along with obviously, kind of red teaming and pen testing the model integrity. But, beyond that, again, I think we're going to see the bridge between the super technical, person that you go, they're really good at their job, but we can't put them in front of anybody, start to change and evolve, and that they are going to be more able to do security in context of the business than do security for the sake of security.
I know you kind of already talked about this a little bit, but love to just hear more about your view of what that future looks like. And so my question is what do you think is going to be true about AI's future impact on cybersecurity that most of your peers today would consider science fiction, right? What's your contrarian view about the opportunity that's going to happen that just maybe other people aren't thinking about?
There's something I was reading, I can't say I'm an expert on it, but this idea of almost a human digital twin that is like a fingerprint, but it is encompassing of your behavior, your language, how you show up in the world and interact in the world. And that is what authenticates you versus some kind of biomarker. And it continues to evolve as you go through life and evolve so that it is consistent. And so that's what's going to, keep us from being replicated and the deep fakes out there. So I don't know. It's creepy maybe to think about, but I do think we're going to, the authentication of, being able to prove you are who you are is going to evolve without a doubt.
For what it's worth, Betsy, I am 100% there with you. And I've used this digital twin concept, right? I've used that literal language. Because I think it's a very compelling vision, because if you can kind of build that digital twin, right, that's a very powerful, right? I think the challenge, right, is people put too much trust in these digital identities, right? And whether that's technical trust or social trust. And so the problem is, especially these new generative AI technology, it's it's increasingly easy to deceive, right? Today it's, fake emails, in 6 months, it's fake videos, and that's fake Zoom calls and FaceTime. And so, a lot of the kind of more superficial indicators for how you verify the authenticity of a session or a communication, right? Those are not going to work in the future, right? And so, but I do think if you have this digital twin, right, there's this kind of multi-dimensional authentication, right? Authentication of, again, whether it's a session or a communication, right? There's a richer set of data that you can use, right, through AI in order to use that kind of digital twin as your key of sorts, right? And that's going to be required as humans' ability to do that authentication of, again, communications, or even a simple algorithms ability to authenticate a user as being the real person they think it is behind the keyboard. That's going to get a lot harder in the future. We're going to have to build a way more advanced way of doing this.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly what caught my eye. I mean, it's interesting because I come from, medical device and manufacturing world. So digital twin is a concept used in the manufacturing space to, digitize that whole, manufacturing operation. So I was always kind of fascinated by that concept anyway. And then, human digital twin. Oh, well, yeah, I can see that. Again, it starts to get creepy, but doesn't it, everything that every time we've said, well, I'm going to give somebody my retinal scan or fingerprints and things. But yeah, I think it's a interesting concept. I don't know how it comes together, but I think it's fascinating.
If we could create a digital twin to check my email for me, that would be great. I don't know if that's part of that.
Let's talk, Steve.
Awesome. All right, Betsy, we're gonna get right into a lightning round. Think of the answer as the same as a tweet, limited characters. So we'll do a
You've met me
round here. Yeah. So first question is, any advice to a security leader who just stepped into their first CISO job, and what they might overestimate or underestimate about it?
That it's your agenda. It's actually not. You're picking up from somebody else and evolving it from there.
What's the best way for a CISO to stay up to date with, security challenges related to AI?
Have some great people on your team that love the topic, wherever they are in the organization, that love the topic, that are spending a lot of their time on it, and have lunch with them and pick their brain as often as possible.
All right, Betsy, personal question here. Not too personal, but give us a book you've read recently that's had a big impact on you, and why.
The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. She is an expert on creating experiences and events and space, and has studied what personal interaction looks like and how to make things really special and impactful. And it's a fantastic book, whether you're running your town hall meeting, something business related, or a birthday party. I used it for my daughter's 4th birthday party to have purpose and connection amongst the people there. So it's a great book.
Maybe sticking on the personal theme, and the answer here is not to be AI related, but if it is, feel free. What's a future technology somewhat related to cybersecurity that you're just personally most excited about or interested in?
Oh, does it have to be cybersecurity? Because I'm going to say it's I want it to be. I'm looking for the parenting bot that everyone says there's no roadmap for being a parent. That's not true. There are things like there is a technology that can tell me that if I don't, give my daughter something to eat in the next 10 minutes, she's going to have a meltdown. Like, and warning sign here and there. I think there can be much more help for parenting, especially of young children. So that's what I'm going to hope for.
All right, Betsy, last one. Security can sit in a bit of a negative state where we sort of feel overwhelmed and as if we don't do well sometimes or all the time. If you take a person who's thinking about taking that first CISO job and you had a chance to sit down with them, what's the best piece of advice you would give them in a positive way to really encourage them that they can do it, and how?
Things have evolved a lot in the view of cybersecurity and the role of the CISO. Yes, the headlines tend to be negative and the scapegoat and we're going to lose our job. But the reality, I don't see that in reality in most organizations. Most organizations at this point do recognize the importance of the role, the importance of the team, the importance to the brand. I mean, just how many cybersecurity statements and privacy statements have popped up in, ESG reports that have historically been, totally focused on business things and reducing waste and doing good in the world. And now we talk cyber and privacy in those. It has changed. They do recognize the importance of it, but focus on the business and the building the relationships. And you really do have the support that you need. And it is a role that is incredibly important and can be fulfilling if you focus on what you are bringing to the business that you're in.
Awesome, Betsy. Well, I wish we had another 4 hours because I have 400 follow-up questions for you, but unfortunately we're getting to the end of the show. So just want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and Steve today, and looking forward to chatting again soon.
Thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
That was Betsy Wille, former Chief Information Security Officer at Abbott.
Thanks for listening to the Enterprise Software Defenders podcast. I'm Steve Ward, the former CISO of the Home Depot and TIAA.
And I'm Evan Reiser, the CEO and founder of Abnormal Security. Please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can always find more great lessons from technology leaders and other enterprise software experts at enterprisesoftware.blog. This show is produced by Josh Muir. See you next time.